Hey, my name is Gladius and welcome to my complete Black Swan guide. Black Swan is a wind nihility character that specializes in doing damage in the form of DOTs. She even has supportive abilities in the form of defense reduction and vulnerability debuff. Her goal is to support teammates that also do DOT damage while also benefiting from them as well, especially if they have methods of DOT detonation, because she doesn't. Black Swan is not difficult to play, but she sure is difficult to understand. I'm here to unveil the truth and bring you the most comprehensive explanation of how she works with the best way to optimize her build, light cone, relics, team builds, and the like. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Black Swan's kit is a lot more complicated than most, so buckle up, this section will be longer than some characters' entire guide. To best understand her kit, I have to start with Black Swan's talent, as her entire kit is revolved around this one passive talent. The talent is a single debuff that is a DOT, or damage over time. This DOT is called Arcana. Arcana, once applied, will last indefinitely until the enemy dies. Although it's just a single debuff, but it can stack similar to Wind Shear. Arcana can have maximum of 50 stacks. At the base of one stack, it already does 240% attack as DOT damage. For every stack, that increased the multiplier by 12. Realistically though, you'll be expecting a range of 10 to 30 on your main target. In simulated universe, you can even reach 50. I'll say this once, but every application of Arcana stack that I'll mention later aren't actually guaranteed. They all have their base chance that scales with their effect hit, also enemies' effect resistance. For the most part, after fully investing into Black Swan's traces, the majority of the application chance will be 65. But don't worry, she'll pretty much guarantee this by building a lot of effect hit rate anyways. Okay, now back to her talent. On the enemy's turn, every other DOT will do their damage first before Arcana. And for every DOT that did damage, Arcana will gain an extra stack. And when Arcana finally does its damage, the stack will be reset back to 1. Except when your ultimate is active, but I'll get to that later. While it's nice to stack it up as much as possible to get the highest instance of DOT damage, but what is more important is to reach a certain stack threshold on as many enemies as possible on the battlefield. Let me explain. There are two major Arcana stack breakpoints that deliver extra side effects when an Arcana is triggered on enemy's turn, and this will only happen in the beginning of the enemy turn when DOTs naturally detonate. Long story short, that DOTs that detonate through other means like Kafka's abilities does not trigger these side effects. When there are 3 or more stacks of Arcana, you reach the first breakpoint. Target adjacent to that enemy also suffered DOT damage equal to 180% attack. This first breakpoint is very important because this instance is counted as DOT damage and triggers the aforementioned extra stack of Arcana on these adjacent targets. This is the main reason I easily consider Black Swan to be the best AoE damage dealer in the form of DOTs. The more enemies there are, the more these Arcana stacks will spread viciously like a plague. The second breakpoint is the 7 stack. When a target has 7 or more stacks, this instance of Arcana damage will ignore 20% of their defense. It's hard to always reach 7 in AoE situations, so this is mainly suffered by the main target with the most stacks. Now, her basic attack is very cool. It doesn't do impressive damage, it gives a skill point just like any other character, but what is cool is that it stacks Arcana. At baseline, there's one application, and for every type of bleed, burn, wind shear, or shock debuff applied to the enemy, or BBWS for short, you get one extra application. Note, you only get one for each type of BBWS, so having multiple dots of the same type will still count as one. For example, 2 shock DOTs still just give you that one extra application. Now, Arcana already counts as wind shear, so basically you have 2 to 5 application chances, depending on if the target has extra BBWS dot types. Black Swan's skill is a 3-target blast ability that also doesn't do much damage initially, but it applies a 20% defense reduction on the 3 targets for 3 turns, while also applying 1 stack of Arcana on them as well. Black Swan's first Ascension trace allows her skill to mimic her basic attack in a sense where you get extra application chances for each BBWS type on the main target of your skill. Black Swan's ultimate is an all-target ability that applies a debuff called Epiphany. Epiphany lasts for 2 turns and does 3 things. 1. It increases enemy damage taken by 25, which is not to be confused with damage increasing. This is a separate vulnerability debuff. It scales very well and works for your whole team. Number 2, it transforms the Arcana DOT into a typing that counts as all of BBWS, resulting in Black Swan's basic attack and skill to always have the maximum of 5 Arcana application chances. Not only that, but enables characters that only detonate a specific type of DOT to also work with Arcana, namely Luca or Gwennyfin. And lastly, Epiphany allows the target's next Arcana, which triggers naturally on their own turn, to not reset the Arcana stack back to 1. Usually techniques give you a slight edge in the beginning of the battle, but Black Swan's technique lasts the entire battle. After using her technique, every enemy enter battle, no matter if it's a new wave or summons from other mobs, they'll get Arcana stacks immediately. The amount of stacks you get is random, but realistically you can expect 2 to 4 on each enemy, and this is the most powerful technique in the game. No enemy can escape this. You really have to worry about having 3 stacks anymore on each enemy. They'll just spread around even more Arcana. That being said, if for some reason you can't use this technique, Black Swan's AoE damage will become more cumbersome. Alright, I know Black Swan's Arcana mechanic is very confusing, but to put it simply, no matter how DOT damage is triggered, Arcana always gains in stacks in correspondence. I want to address something really important though, is that you never gain Arcana stacks when you first apply any DOT. It's when DOTs actually do damage, that's when Arcana stacks go up in response. I've done the calcs for her traces. The priority when leveling your traces will be picking up the Ascension traces first, then maxing out her talent, then pick up the attack percent, effect hit, and wind damage. Finally, you can work on the basic attack, skill, and ultimate pretty much evenly. Black Swan is actually quite expensive to fully invest because you don't really want to skip out leveling anything. To best understand how to build Black Swan, let's look at her damage composition. The vast majority of her damage will be coming from DOTs outside of her turn, either from teammates triggering it or enemies' turns. The only portion of her damage that can benefit from crit is the direct. It's very small though, it's obviously not worth building crit on Black Swan. Like I mentioned before, most of her Arcana applications go by a 65% base chance, which is quite low, so we can expect to build a lot of effect hit rate. Effect hit rate required to reach 100% application on normal elite mobs at least will be 120. Black Swan makes it easy for you to build effect hit. Her final Ascension trace converts 60% of your effect hit into damage bonus. This caps out at 72%, which is also coincidentally 120 effect hit. Let's talk about main stats on her relics. For chest piece, you'll likely be looking for effect hit rate due to how hard it is to reach 120. We want to get as close to 120 as possible to have that Arcana stacks consistency, also benefiting from her final Ascension trace as well. But we definitely don't want to go way over 120 effect hit. Trying to guarantee Arcana in every possible scenario is not necessary. You'll find out that there are so many application chances, having one stack occasionally miss is almost negligible. With that said, if you're well over 120 with an EHR chest, you're better off using attack percent chest piece. Even if you're just sitting at 100 EHR, trust me, it's not a big deal. For boots, it's very interesting. The theoretical damage increase on paper is actually not that great for speed boots. You generate a little more skill points and a little more Arcana stacks here and there, but it's nothing groundbreaking. What is important though is to go before enemies. The whole team's DOT damage will also rely on enemy turns. It's really important to set up your defense reduction and Arcana applications so they can properly spread and do even more damage. For Sphere, it's pretty close between attack percent and wind damage. Wind damage wins out just so slightly, but if you're planning on running with Runmei and Lycone with damage increase, like Eye of the Prey, attack percent is actually better. For Rope, this is the one where I tell you definitively it's attack percent, and it's not even close. Energy regeneration isn't great because her ultimate isn't the biggest part of her kit. 120 energy cost isn't even that high. A break effect rope is also not great because she doesn't have the most toughness break units just from basic attacking. For Relic Set Bonus itself, I'm not too picky when it comes to the ornament set. Hand Cosmic is technically the best in slot, but is very annoying to farm SU World 5, with the other set being useless on all characters. I'd much rather be stamina efficient and go for the other options listed here. For outer 4Ps, you really just have one good option if you're serious about investing in Black Swan. Prisoner in the Deep Confinement is miles better than any other option, and the fact that other damage dealers of the DOT archetype also utilize this set. I usually just let 2-piece pass if you have good pieces, but for Black Swan, I'm gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna recommend you farm this set no matter what. The choices of light cone for Black Swan is very pleasant. I've done all the calcs so you don't have to. Black Swan is a damage dealer that also have supportive attributes, so I've normalized light cones that also support the team to be compared with pure DPS light cones. This is what you get as a result considering the whole team's damage. Black Swan have the most diverse and decent performing light cone options ever. These are comparing 4 stars at S5 and 5 stars at S1. With gacha RNG, we always end up with different super impositions, especially on the good light cones. But in the end, we always have good options to fall back on, like the Herder Shop light cone, Solitary Healing, and the new MOC Shop light cone, It's Showtime. Black Swan's signature is her best in slot, but it's not far ahead so much that you're missing out by not pulling for it. There's a good amount of selection, you really can't go wrong with one of these at high super imposition. But if I were to pick a favorite out of the bunch, it would have to be Eye of the Prey. The effect hit rate it provides makes building Black Swan very easy and stress-free. No matter which light cone you end up with, try your best to get as close to 120 effect hit rate as possible on Black Swan. Although Black Swan has a very complicated kit, I'll admit, actually forming a team or even playing her is very simple. Black Swan is a skill point positive character that is quite lenient as to how you can play her. As long as you have synergistic teammates, her Arcana DOT will stack and spread passively without needing you to pay too much attention. Just like Kafka, Black Swan have a DOT archetype of a team build. And I want to address something very important, is that you don't want Black Swan to be more backloaded than she already is. Her team's DOT damage relies on enemies taking their turn, so avoid using any slow debuffs or imprisonment. That being said though, you're perfectly fine to use freeze mechanics as well as Runmay's ultimate pushback. In fact, you're actually encouraged to do that, because both of these aforementioned crowd controls involves the enemy actually fully taking a turn before being pushed back shortly thereafter to take another turn, resulting in 2 DOT turn triggers by the enemy in a short time span. This actually makes backloaded nature of Black Swan's ultimate not feel as sluggish. It's no surprise that her best teammate is Kafka. Kafka contributes shock DOT and also consistent ways to trigger DOT outside of enemy turns as well. Without Kafka, the other DOT damage dealers are less ideal because they have limited ways to detonate DOTs and are sometimes even locked behind Eidolons like Sampo's E4 or Luca's E6. With 2 DOT damage dealers already, you can slot in a third one if you want. Gwynethyn is the best option if you are running 3 DOTs. You also have the option with damage boosting supports, which is sometimes the better option. The best DOT team support is Runmei and is not even close. But characters like Asta and Silverwolf can also work. I want to point out that if you're using a hypercarry damage support like Tingyun, Hanya, or Bronya, I suggest using the buffs on Kafka instead of Black Swan. Black Swan just really want to go before enemies. She doesn't really gain too much for extra speed or action values. Just like any other solid teams, you want to have a sustain slot to keep everyone healthy. There's a lot of options, but I'll talk about some interesting synergies. Huohuo will be the best healer for a DOT team, giving extra energy and attack percent is very nice. Locha is very comfortable to play with, he generates the most skill points for the team to enjoy. Then you have 2 interesting preservation units that you might be surprised to see here. They can freeze enemies, so like I said before, freeze make DOTs do more damage by increasing enemy turn counts. Also, one interesting preservation light cone is Trin of the Universal Market. This unpopular light cone actually have use in a DOT team for Black Swan anyway. Don't expect it to do a lot of damage, that's not my point, It contributes a free burn DOT that counts as one of the BBWS typing, and if you paid attention before, you'll know that she benefits from these BBWS DOTs. Now let's talk about Eidolons. And I'll start by saying Black Swan doesn't require any of her Eidolons to be good. Her best teammates being Kafka and Ran-Mei, both are worth way more than multiples of her own Eidolons. If you have a complete and cohesive team, Black Swan will feel very satisfying to play. But if you don't have a team built around the dot archetype, no amount of Eidolons can fix that. But real quick, I'll go over her most notable Eidolon. Eidolon 1 is amazing, simply put. This is the ideal type of Eidolon for a team-focused character, which boosts the damage of the entire team. Eidolon 1 allows any type of BBWS dot to also lower their respective elements' resistance by 25%. This is crazy good, because resistance lowering is very scarce, and along with defense shred, it's just one of the last ways to further push DOT teams to a higher ceiling. Eidolon 1 stands out so much, I have no hesitation when being asked E1 versus signature light cone question. No matter what light cone you have in your bag, E1 will always take that priority. It is that good. Eidolon 1 is so good, the other ones just pale in comparison. They're all more or less selfish improvements to Black Swan herself. It's nothing to write home about. Guys, that concludes my complete Black Swan guide. I'll be hosting a discussion in the comment section. I'll be answering all your questions personally. Leave a like and subscribe if you gotten value out of my video. My name is Gladius. Thank you for watching. Until next time.